Okay, I hope y'all can see and hear me. My name is Ahba Kundi. I'm a team lead in CEDAR's Office of Compliance, Office of Drug Security, Integrity, and Response. Our office has led DSCSA implementation. And yes, Connie typically does do a lot of our outreach, but I am joining today. And I do want to spend time on the presentation and make sure that we allot enough time for Q&A at the end. I'm seeing some new names here, but I know there are some familiar folks as well. I'll preface this by saying that if you've seen one of our presentations, you'll be familiar with this one as well. So with that, I'm going to take myself off camera and get into presentation mode, and then we'll switch to the Q&A at the end. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ahba.
Okay, and please chime in if you cannot hear me. I'm going to assume that we are good. Okay, so this is our, oh, go ahead.
And we are all good.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is a presentation today. It's implementing DSCSA and expectations for 2023 and beyond. Yes, I know we're in 2024, but as we know, the key requirements for enhanced product tracing technically statutorily went into effect last year. We always throw up this disclaimer. It is just a general overview for those of you who have been working hard at DSCSA implementation for a long time. You certainly understand that because it is the law that keeps giving. It is dense. It has, we also have a lot of supporting guidances that we've issued, some proposed rules. So we really couldn't cover all of DSCSA in any of these presentations that we've given. And you should certainly visit our DSCSA site on fda.gov to learn more information. My objectives for the presentation are really to go over some of our recent guidances for industry and also review DSCSA implementation and expectations for trading partners to achieve interoperable electronic tracing of products at the package level, or as I often refer to them in shorthand as the enhanced requirements. I feel like I probably don't need to do this for this audience, but again, we always present with the hope that we are reaching new folks for the first time. So we do try to do a little bit of preliminary groundwork each time when we're talking about the DSCSA. So the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, or DSCSA, was enacted over 10 years ago at this point, November 27, 2013. It outlines steps to achieve interoperable electronic tracing of product at the package level to identify and trace certain prescription drugs as they are distributed in the US. It enhances our ability to help protect consumers from exposure to drugs that may be counterfeit, stolen, contaminated, or otherwise harmful. It improves detection and removal of potentially dangerous drugs from the drug supply chain. And it also establishes national licensure standards for wholesale drug distributors and third-party logistics providers, or 3PLs. And I'll say at the outset, we're really not going to talk about that last bullet too much at all today. In fact, this might be it. Our focus really is on the traceability requirements and the enhanced requirements in particular. So this is a slide that we've recently started incorporating as an example of why the DSCSA was enacted. We have threats to the supply chain all the time, and this counterfeit Ozempic event is just one example of the kinds of threats that exist and that we are continually addressing and trying to prevent all the time, and that the DSCSA helps the agency and trading partners address and protect against better. So the DSCSA key requirements, I'll say up front that these are the key traceability requirements. And we often describe them as falling into 4 buckets here. Product tracing, verification, product identifiers, and authorized trading partners. And I'll also note that the requirements I'm going to be talking about apply to manufacturers, repackagers, wholesale distributors, and dispensers, which is primarily pharmacies. So some central definitions to understand from the DSCSA. A lot of the traceability provisions hinge on products and transactions of products. And those are defined in the law. And a product is defined as a prescription drug in finished dosage form for administration to a patient without further manufacturing. And again, there are a lot of statutory exemptions to that definition. I'm not going to read them all up here, and I'll just note that, for a fuller understanding of it, please refer directly to the law, but this gives you a clear general overview of that definition. And transactions. A transaction involves the transfer of product where a change of ownership occurs. And that definition as well has a number of exclusions that are generally listed here. Another central cornerstone of DSCSA trading traceability requirements is that, trading partners, their trading partners all need to be authorized, meaning appropriately registered or licensed, essentially. But what it means to be authorized varies depending on the type of trading partner you are. So manufacturers and repackagers have to have valid registration with FDA. Wholesale distributors and 3PLs have to have a valid state or federal license and compliance with reporting requirements. And again, I'll note that while we do list 3PLs here, the provisions that we're talking about today with regard to traceability are handled or there are requirements for manufacturers, repackagers, distributors, and dispensers. But 3PLs also do need to be authorized. And dispensers have to have a valid state license. And we list some resources here where folks can go to confirm information about the status of their trading partners. So if you can recall that slide I just showed with the 4 buckets of information, one of them is product tracing. And product tracing generally refers to requirements that trading partners have to provide, capture, and store key documentation about transactions of products. And, for the past 10 years or so, the product tracing information that these trading partners are required to pass and receive and store are the 3 types of documentation you see listed here. It's transaction information, which generally has information about the product and some key dates with regard to transaction and potentially shipment and business information. The transaction history, which is a statement in paper or electronic form, including the TI or the transaction information, which we abbreviate as TI, for each prior transaction going back to the manufacturer of the product. And the transaction statement, which I call the Scout's Oath, it's essentially a statement that affirms that the entity transferring ownership in a transaction is authorized as required and essentially complying with these DSCSA and did not knowingly ship a suspect or illegitimate product, some other, and didn't alter any of the information. But that's all summarized here, so I won't go line by line with that. I'll also note that many of you also are probably aware that while we have the TH listed here, we are at a moment of change where in the enhanced setting, which I'll talk about more in a moment, the TH, the requirement to pass TH does sunset. So it's still valuable to note here and educate folks about what has been in effect for a long time But I did want to at least acknowledge that I recognize that that it changes in the future state. So of those 4 quadrants or 4 buckets, the other bucket there was product identifier. This is an obligation or requirement for manufacturers and repackagers to encode product identifiers on their prescription drug packages at the smallest saleable unit level. The product identifier is comprised of the elements listed there on the left, and the image in the middle is a really good example of what that could look like. So again, those key components of NDC, serial number, lot number, and expiration date, human and machine readable format, and the 2D data matrix barcode. And as the DSCSA was designed, there's an increasing phased-in requirements to engage with that product identifier more and more for verification activities. Which leads us to the third bucket of traceability requirements, verification. These are essentially investigatory and notification reporting steps that trading partners have to undertake when they encounter suspect or illegitimate product. So suspect product is product where there is a reason to believe that product potentially is counterfeit, diverted, stolen, subject of a fraudulent transaction, it's intentionally adulterated or appears otherwise unfit for distribution, such that the product would result in serious adverse health consequences or death to humans. An illegitimate product is where there is credible evidence for any of those things. And as part of DSCSA requirements, when trading partners encounter or discover illegitimate product, they have to notify FDA of that illegitimate product within 24 hours using Form FDA 3911. I'll show an example of that in a bit. And they also have notification obligations for their trading partners as well. We've issued a number of guidances about verification requirements and our recommendations, and those are listed here as well. There's definitions, identification of suspect product, and verification systems, which is the newest guidance we've issued on the verification. So I just summarized those 3 at the bottom. The definitions guidance, it applies to the definitions of suspect and illegitimate product, as I just recapped a moment ago. And specifically as those terms are used to describe trading partners' verification obligations, and that includes notification. It's intended to help industry identify suspect and illegitimate product in the U.S. pharmaceutical distribution supply chain by interpreting certain terms used in the definitions of suspect product and illegitimate product. And I'll say for the next couple of slides, I'm not going to read these line by line, but this does give you some sense of where you can go to look up more information about some of these terms. So the guidance does address counterfeit, diverted, and stolen. I'll give folks a minute here to look. And it also addresses fraudulent transaction and unfit for distribution. So another verification guidance that we have issued is the drug supply chain, the identification of suspect product and notification. And this one identifies specific scenarios that could significantly increase the risk of a suspect product entering the pharmaceutical distribution supply chain. It provides recommendations on how trading partners can identify and determine suspect product as soon as practicable. It describes when manufacturers should notify FDA of a high risk that a suspect product is illegitimate. And it sets forth the process by which trading partners must terminate notifications in consultation with FDA. It also addresses how trading partners should notify us when they determine that a product in their possession or control is an illegitimate product, and how manufacturers should notify FDA regarding products with a high risk of illegitimacy. And this is the form that I referred to a moment ago. This is what Form FDA 3911 looks like, and this is what folks are supposed to use to notify us. We have more information on our DSCSA page about the submission process or avenues for sending us these notifications. So as I said a moment ago, the verification systems guidance is the newest guidance to add to that group. And it provides recommendations for a robust verification system for determination, quarantine, and investigation of suspect products, and quarantine, notification, and disposition of illegitimate products. It recommends how trading partners submit cleared product notifications to FDA. And it addresses verification, including saleable returns at the package level for product identifiers on packages in homogeneous cases intended to be introduced in a transaction into commerce. And so these are some of the general categories that the guidance discusses in terms of what a robust investigation includes. It really does include that active communication and coordination, and using appropriate lab standards, controls, and techniques for lab testing, and analyzing how the product came into possession or control. And I'll say an overarching theme here is that it does require a certain level of relationships and awareness among trading partners about who to go to in their upstream or downstream to coordinate and talk with each other when they encounter suspect product or undertaking an investigation. This is another one where I'm not going to read the details, but it's here because the guidance does also talk about addressing requirements for the verification of the product identifier at the package level. And as you can see, there are similarities across the different categories of trading partner, but there are some differences as well. So it is worth evaluating, your activities, determining your trading partner hat, and then understanding what your obligations on this front are. So this is another guidance that it has been less than a year since we finalized, so we still count it as a more recent guidance. It is just a finalization of the draft that we issued, the waivers, exceptions, and exemptions guidance. We were statutorily obligated to issue this guidance, and it essentially just lays out the process by which the DSCSA or by which trading partners can request a waiver, exception, or exemption from DSCSA traceability requirements. And it talks a little bit about the factors that we intend to consider when evaluating such requests, and also talks a bit about how we determine when FDA initiated exceptions and exemptions were appropriate. So those would be situations where we're not responding to a request, but we determine that it is appropriate to issue an exception or exemption for another reason. And it also describes the process that we intend to follow once every 2 years to review and make determinations on the appropriateness of renewing a previously approved waiver, exception, or exemption where it's applicable. And to pull it back a little bit, I'll just say that the DSCSA does permit the agency to grant, a waiver, exception, or exemption. And again, those are just different categories of relief where we would grant it or issue it. Again, upon request from a trading partner who can't comply for some reason or another, or again, on our own initiative, we may issue one. So another guidance we've issued is the standards for interoperable exchange of information for tracing of certain human finished prescription drugs. It's a mouthful, but we were statutorily mandated to identify standards necessary to facilitate adoption of secure interoperable electronic data exchange, which is very pertinent to the phase of DSCSA implementation we're all in right now. And it updates the policy articulated in the draft that we issued to reflect the enhanced drug distribution requirements that went into effect in November of 2023. Of course, we know the compliance policies were issued. So it includes that only electronic methods of product tracing will be permitted, and verification of product at the package level will be required, unless there's an applicable waiver exception or exemption. The enhanced drug distribution security at the package level under the DSCSA guidance is another key guidance for where we're at this point in time. It clarifies the enhanced drug distribution security requirements listed in 582G1 of the FD&C Act. It outlines and makes recommendations with respect to the system attributes necessary to enable secure tracing of product at the package level, including allowing for the use of verification, inference, and aggregation as necessary. And it also identifies the standards necessary to facilitate the adoption of secure, interoperable electronic data exchange among the supply chain. So a little bit more about enhanced product tracing. This is a graphic that, again, if you've seen our presentations, you've seen this before. It essentially talks about how the TI and TS shall be exchanged in a secure, interoperable electronic manner. The TH sunsets, as I previously noted. The content of the TI changes. It includes the product identifier at the package level. It also has different requirements now with regard to those around promptly responding with the TI and TS upon request. It could be from the secretary, FDA basically, or other appropriate federal or state official in the event of a recall or for the purpose of investigating a suspect product or an illegitimate product. And also talks about requirements around promptly facilitating the gathering of information to produce that string of TIs going back to the manufacturer as applicable. So the TH goes away, but in its place are other requirements for capabilities to essentially help gather or be able to participate in the gathering of that information to build that full chain of transaction information history. The guidance also talks a bit about handling aggregation errors and other discrepancies, exceptions handling. The law requires product tracing information to be true, accurate, and complete. And we also recognize there could be clerical errors or discrepancy in that data that may not be indicative of a suspect product. So we do address different ways to handle those situations. The guidance also addresses enhanced verification. So at the package level and saleable returns. So here again, this is another graphic that we typically use, but the enhanced requirements and what we address in the guidance are the requirements for systems and processes for verification of product at the package level, including the standardized numerical identifier or SNI. And then we also address the requirements around accepting saleable returns and associating the saleable return product with the TI and TS associated with the product. So again, those are things that change in the enhanced world, and worth noting here for a moment. So with everything moving to an all electronic state, FDA is trying to keep up too. So we have a number of DSCSA IT utilities that are hosted on our general CEDAR platform. So this slide is really to help explain how that works, because I recognize it may be a little confusing. CEDAR hosts something called the CEDAR Next Gen portal, and it is the FDA interface to exchange information between industry members and FDA. And there are different program areas, not just DSCSA, that rely on Next Gen, but we have our own DSCSA IT utilities that are hosted on there. So we have the WEIR platform. That is the way that you submit requests for a waiver, exception, or exemption to us. Again, that page is, or that mechanism is described on our webpage, and it's also described in the guidance. We have the 3911 platform, and that is where you can submit your notifications, your forms that way. That is an avenue. You can also do it by email. And we have the DSCSA portal, which is going to be the mechanism by which, when we are investigating suspect or illegitimate product, or for the purpose of a recall, if we need to reach out to a trading partner to obtain their electronic tracing information or supporting investigatory documentation, that is the way that we are going to do that. This is a little bit more about the process by which we would seek and obtain the information through the DSCSA portal. A trading partner would be notified by email when they have a message in the portal. You would go through certain steps to confirm that you are the appropriate point of contact. And then you would have a landing page, try to make it user-friendly with event tiles. And you could see your activity log. You can you'd know when you have an information request from us. You'd be able to provide and upload data files. We accept a variety of file formats. There may be, depending on the type of file format that you use, there might be manual entry data steps that you have to undertake, as well as uploading the files. Again, it just depends on, we can parse XML and JSON files, which we know often is how EPCS information is converted, but again, we can accept different file formats for that. So you don't need any additional software or hardware or anything like that to be able to communicate with us. And, we're using it today. And, generally we are in communication with trading partners. We figure out a way to get it done. And it's a collaborative process generally to just communicate and get the information, but it's certainly not meant to be something that folks have to significantly change, their IT utilities in order to connect with us. That was not the intention at all. And then that brings us to more present day. We have issued, I'll just skip ahead. It's these two compliance policies. And, together we describe them as a stabilization period, but essentially these guidances describe our policies regarding the enforcement of the enhanced requirements under 582 G1. Again, those were statutorily effective November 27th, 2023. It accommodates the additional time that may be needed to continue to develop and refine appropriate systems and processes to conduct interoperable electronic tracing at the package level to achieve robust supply chain security under the DSCSA, while helping ensure continued patient access to prescription drugs. So this was, we refer to them together. It was issued very in conjunction with the other compliance policy. And it's a revision and extension of a 2020 compliance policy for an additional year from November of 2023 to November of this year regarding wholesale distributor verification of saleable return drug product and dispenser verification when investigating suspect or illegitimate product, because again, we saw those requirements and those under G1 to be related. And as far as where that brings us today, we are in the stabilization period, and we really hope that folks are utilizing every last moment of it. We're pretty much 6 months away from the November deadline, and so in the thick of things. And we really, all we've done, we've issued this time for folks to implement, troubleshoot, and mature systems and processes. So we know that progress is being made, and we hope that that continues. And what that means is that by November of this year, the enhanced distribution security requirements will be in effect. And so we will finally be in that all electronic state, and enhanced product tracing and verification at the package level will also be in swing. As part of the stabilization period and essentially a check-in and wanting to understand success stories and how people were using the stabilization period, we did have an RFI that posted. It closed in February, but we did get good feedback. The information is there if you wanted to go review the comments about industry experience, lessons learned, success stories with implementing 582 G1 requirements. And as always, we have so many guidances to read about DSCSA, and you can go to our webpage. We have a specific law and policy page, but there's a lot of good information throughout our DSCSA website. And those are listed here. It's our main page and our reg documents. I want to click ahead. So I'll say I do have a couple of updates, or at least one. We've recently announced a joint meeting with PDG that we have a public-private partnership with. It's essentially a public meeting. And so if you do go to our main page, you can find out more information about that upcoming meeting. It's June 17th and June 18th. So that's a plug for that. But that brings me to the end of my presentation. And I will switch back over here.
We have some questions from the crowd, whether it be here live or virtually. I know we got a bunch of people online. Any questions? Nope, got one. Here we go. See how this works. Turn this on, right? Oh, look, even better.
So far, how many exceptions and waivers that FDA has approved? And is that information publicly available?
Did you say how many exceptions scenarios have they approved?
That FDA has approved, the trading partners. How many applications they have approved? Yep. Or is that information available in FDA's website?
Could you hear the question?
I could. I think he was asking about the number of exceptions and exemptions we've approved when we get those requests.
Correct.
It's not public information, and so you're not going to find it on our website. But that authority and that process has been stood up for years, and so we do routinely receive those, and we have granted some and we have denied some.
Okay. Other questions in the room, or Lindsay, any online? I was waiting. I knew you'd have one. Here we come, Ahba.
So Ahba, on page 5, slide 5, you mentioned the authorized trading partners, and you described each one and their regulatory oversight. I'm curious, come this November, how FDA plans to enforce DSCSA at the dispenser level. especially since they're governed by their state boards of pharmacy and not FDA?
We frequently get questions about our enforcement strategy, and that's not something we typically discuss. But for the purpose of DSCSA, dispensers are within the federal framework. We understand, and we've gotten feedback about dispenser readiness overall, and we recognize that collaboration at the state level is key, and that's, you know, those are relationships that we're going to continue to cultivate now for, you know, for the foreseeable future. I think the DSCSA essentially requires that, if not explicitly, implicitly.
Oh. Anyone else? There we go. Chris has one.
Question is on data that'll be in the supply chain, product that will be in the supply chain that may not have had data. So maybe it's at the end of the supply chain and there's an investigation at a later time, or it's still in the supply chain moving through after November 27th of 2024. Is there going to be any kind of guidance on, you know, a grandfathering policy or something like that for those, you know, products that could be involved in some sort of either transaction or investigation after the date? Does that question make sense?
It makes sense. So depending on, I think when the data that exists for, so you're describe the scenario more, you're saying if things are caught in the supply chain at a point where it's not electronic, or
yeah. So let's say after November, there's a investigation on a product that was already in the supply chain that didn't have data, but, you know, we're requesting data for it at that point. You know, is that exempt from that kind of investigation, or?
So I think it would be subject to whatever. So if it was in the stabilization period, if that's when it was generated, I think we would look to the dates essentially to see what obligations attached to the data, because it's not like we're going from a no data state to enhanced requirement data state. There have been data requirements or transaction documentation requirements for a long time, but generally we would see, you know, what was effective during this time, if that makes sense.
We had a question from online asking if there will be a comment period after the after the FDA PDG public meeting of any sort.
I think we're planning to announce more information about the mechanisms by which we solicit feedback or can get comments from folks pending that meeting. So stay tuned. Yeah.
Great. Anyone else? What else we got here? Where at? Yeah, we have another question about unserialized inventory. It says the question is if wholesalers is a company allowed to sell unserialized inventory to wholesalers post November 27 if there's been an exemption granted by the FDA? My assumption would be yes if there was an exemption, but I don't know under what scenario that exemption would be applied.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be something where there's I'm trying to read the comment or the question here, but essentially the WEIR request process can exempt trading partners from any 582 requirements, and if it was subject to an exemption, be it from unserialized inventory, or if they're referring not to the physical product, but some of the documentation, I'm not sure. It could be granted for that. But again, I'm not going to say definitively that we would. We'd have to understand the situation better. But it's within our authority to do so.
Very good. Go ahead. We got one here in the room. Here comes Corinne.
Thank you. One of the earlier slides mentioned that biologics were not covered by the DSCSA. I'm just wondering what the rationale for. I think it was a definition of prescription products, but it said that biologics were not part of not covered. Just kind of wondering if there's a reason why they wouldn't be. Similar manner and.
They would be. I don't think the slides said that.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe I just misread the definition, but okay. Thank you.
Everyone good? All right. Ahba, thank you so much. We appreciate the time and the information. One of these times we're going to get you or Connie here in person, but again, I appreciate you making the time and speaking with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.